I still remember the smell of her perfume when she walked into my courtroom that morning. It was strong, expensive, the kind that announces itself before the person wearing it even speaks. She moved like someone who'd never been told no in her entire life, and when she tossed her designer handbag onto the defense table, I heard the heavy clunk of metal hardware hitting wood. That sound stuck with me, because in that same moment, I noticed an elderly man sitting in the back row, holding a worn baseball cap in his lap, and the contrast between those two people told me everything I needed to know about why we were all there. This was going to be one of those cases that reminds you why you put on the robe every morning. If you've been following these stories, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened next is something I need you to hear all the way through. I'm Judge Frank Caprio, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw, what I felt, and what I did when privilege walked into my courtroom and tried to rewrite the rules. Let me take you back to that day. It was a Tuesday morning, November 14th, 2023, and I'd already been through 6 cases before this one came up on my docket. The courtroom was warm, almost too warm, and I remember loosening my collar slightly before I called the next case. The charge sheet said hit and run with property damage and leaving the scene of an accident. The defendant's name was Vanessa Caldwell, age 24, and the complainant was Harold Brennan, age 69. When I read those names, I had no idea what was about to unfold, but I felt that familiar tug in my chest that tells me to pay close attention. Vanessa walked to the defendant's table like she was walking into a boutique, not a courtroom. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people make in a month, and her heels clicked on the tile floor with a rhythm that said she owned the space. I noticed a gold bracelet on her wrist that caught the light every time she moved her hand, and when she sat down, she didn't look at me. She looked at her phone. I let it go for a moment because I wanted to see if her attorney would correct her, but he didn't. He just shuffled papers and avoided my eyes. That told me something right there. Harold Brennan stood up from the back row when I called his name, and I watched him walk slowly to the front. He wore a blue work shirt tucked into jeans that had seen better days, and his hands shook slightly as he approached the stand. I asked him to state his name for the record, and his voice was quiet but steady. He said, "Harold Brennan, Your Honor." And then he added, "Veteran United States Army 1968 to 1971.
Buckle up, guys. Today we're going to witness a courtroom collision between privilege and principle. A young woman walks in draped in confidence and designer labels, while an elderly veteran waits quietly in the back row. The charge, hit and run. The atmosphere is tense, the contrast unmistakable. From the very first glance, it's clear this case is about far more than a traffic violation.
I nodded at him with respect, and I saw him straighten his shoulders just a little bit. That small gesture told me he was a man who still carried himself with pride, even when life had knocked him down. I looked at the case file in front of me and read the details out loud so everyone in the courtroom could hear them. On October 29, 2023, at approximately 6:15 p.m., Harold Brennan was driving his 2004 Honda Civic westbound on Cranston Street when a white BMW SUV ran a red light at the intersection of Park Avenue and struck the driver's side of his vehicle. The impact pushed Harold's car into a streetlight pole, causing significant damage to the driver's door and front quarter panel. The BMW did not stop. A witness, Maria Gonzalez, who was standing at the bus stop on the corner, wrote down the license plate number and called 911. That plate number led the police to Vanessa Caldwell. I looked up from the file and asked Officer Torres, who was present to testify, to walk me through what happened when he arrived at the scene. Officer Torres, badge number 4721, stepped forward and told me he arrived at 6:23 p.m., 8 minutes after the collision. He said,
The officer details the crash with clinical precision. A green light for Harold, a red light ignored by a speeding BMW. The impact crushes metal and sends a modest Honda spinning into a pole. 8 minutes later, the victim is still shaken inside his wrecked car. The accused never stopped. The facts begin stacking up, calm and methodical, against a story that's already starting to unravel.
Harold was still sitting in his car, visibly shaken, and the damage was extensive. The driver's side door was crushed inward, the front left tire was flat, and the headlight was shattered. Officer Torres said Harold told him he was on his way home from work when the BMW ran the light at high speed and hit him without warning. The officer took photos, collected the witness statement, and filed the report. He said Harold was cooperative, calm, and concerned about his daughter, who he needed to pick up from school. I asked Harold to tell me in his own words what happened that day, and he looked at me with tired eyes. He said, "Judge, I was just driving home. I work nights as a security guard at a warehouse, and I just finished a double shift because my daughter needs her medication. It's expensive, and we don't have insurance that covers all of it." He paused, and I saw him swallow hard before continuing. He said the light was green. He was going the speed limit, and then suddenly there was a loud crash and everything went sideways. He said he didn't even see the other car until it was too late. When he got out of his car, shaking and trying to understand what just happened, the BMW was already gone. He said he felt helpless standing there on the side of the road, knowing his car was totaled and he didn't have the money to fix it. I looked over at Vanessa, and she was still looking at her phone. I said, "Ms. Caldwell, could you please put your phone away and pay attention to these proceedings?" She glanced up at me, sighed loudly, and slid the phone into her bag. She didn't apologize. She didn't even pretend to care. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something to her, and she rolled her eyes. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. I asked her if she understood the charges against her, and she said, "Yes, I understand, but I don't think this is fair." I asked her to explain what she meant by that, and she leaned back in her chair like she was about to explain something obvious to a child. She said,
Harold speaks softly about double shifts and a daughter who needs expensive medication. Across the room, the defendant scrolls her phone until the judge forces her attention forward. When questioned, she shrugs off the collision, claiming she felt nothing. The contrast is jarring. A man worried about survival, and a driver more concerned about a brand meeting than the wreckage left behind.
"I was in a hurry that day. I had an important meeting with a brand partnership, and I couldn't afford to be late. The light was yellow when I went through it, not red, and I didn't realize I'd even hit anyone until the police showed up at my house 2 days later." I looked at her carefully and asked, "So you're saying you didn't feel the impact of hitting another vehicle hard enough to crush the door and send it into a streetlight pole?" She shrugged and said, "I drive a BMW X5. It's a big car. I didn't feel anything unusual. Here's where I want to stop and ask you something. Have you ever watched someone dig themselves into a hole and wondered when they'd realize they should stop talking? Drop a comment below if you've ever been in a courtroom or seen someone make things worse for themselves by not knowing when to be quiet. I see it more than you'd think. And this was one of those moments. Let me keep going. I turned to Officer Torres and asked him if there was any evidence that contradicted Ms. Caldwell's version of events. He nodded and said, "Yes, Your Honor. We have traffic camera footage from the intersection." He handed me a tablet, and I watched the video. The timestamp said 6:14:47 p.m. I saw Harold's Honda approaching the intersection with a green light, and then I saw the white BMW blow through a clearly red light at what looked like 50 miles per hour in a 35 zone. The impact was violent. The BMW hit the Honda so hard that the smaller car spun almost completely around before hitting the pole. And then, without even slowing down, the BMW kept going. It didn't stop, it didn't hesitate, it just disappeared down the street. I looked at Vanessa and said, "Ms. Caldwell, I just watched the footage. The light was red, not yellow, and the impact was significant. How do you explain leaving the scene?" She shifted in her seat and said, "Like I said, I didn't realize I hit anyone. I thought maybe I went over a pothole or something." I asked her if she checked her car for damage when she got home, and she said no.
Traffic footage changes everything. The camera shows the BMW blasting through a red light at high speed, smashing into Harold's car and driving off without hesitation. Confronted with the video, she doubles down, insisting she thought it was a pothole. Meanwhile, Harold explains the toll, 3-hour bus rides and missed work. Responsibility hangs in the air, but she refuses to claim it.
I asked her if she heard any sirens or saw any emergency vehicles, and she said no. I asked her if it occurred to her to stop and check if anyone was hurt, and she looked at me like I'd asked her to solve a calculus problem. She said, "I told you. I didn't think it was a big deal." That's when Harold spoke up from the witness area. He said, "Your Honor, may I say something?" I nodded and told him to go ahead. He said, "I don't want to cause trouble. I just want my car fixed so I can get back to work. My daughter, she's 12 and she has asthma. Without my car, I can't get her to her doctor appointments. I can't get to work. I've been taking the bus for 2 weeks now, and it takes me 3 hours each way." His voice cracked a little bit, and I saw him grip the edge of the bench. He said, "I'm not asking for anything extra. I just want things to be made right." I looked at Vanessa and asked her if she had insurance. She said yes. I asked her if she'd filed a claim or contacted Harold to offer to pay for the damages. She said no. I asked her why not, and she said, "Because I didn't think I was responsible. I still don't." Her attorney put his hand on her arm like he was trying to stop her from talking, but she pulled away from him. She said, "Judge, do you know who my father is?" And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when someone thinks their last name is going to save them. I leaned forward.
Then comes the turning point. Asked why she never reached out. She fires back. "Do you know who my father is?" The courtroom stiffens. The judge shuts it down instantly. Status means nothing here. Her defiance escalates, declaring she takes orders from no one. The room falls silent as authority meets entitlement head-on, and the consequences of that arrogance begin to loom large.
And said, "Ms. Caldwell, I don't care who your father is. In this courtroom, everyone is equal. You're here to answer for your actions, not to tell me about your connections." She stared at me for a second, and then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "I don't take orders from anyone, including you." The courtroom went silent. Even her attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. I felt the weight of the gavel in my hand, and I took a slow breath before I responded. I said, "Miss Caldwell, let me be very clear. You are in a court of law. You will follow the rules of this court, and you will show respect to everyone in this room, including Mr. Brennan, who has done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time because of your reckless behavior." She crossed her arms and said, "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who doesn't understand what it's like to have real responsibilities." I felt my heart rate go up, but I kept my voice steady. I said, "Real responsibilities. Mr. Brennan works double shifts to pay for his daughter's medication. He served his country. He's here asking for basic fairness, and you think you have real responsibilities?" That's when Officer Torres stepped forward again and said, "Your Honor, there's something else."
An officer reveals a public Instagram video posted just minutes after the crash. On screen, she laughs about flying through lights and hitting something, smiling beside visible damage. The timestamp seals it. The denial collapses under her own words. What began as negligence now looks like conscious disregard. The digital evidence transforms the case from careless driving into calculated indifference.
He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to say what he was about to say. I asked him to continue, and he pulled out his phone. He said, "After we identified Ms. Caldwell as the driver, I did a routine check of her social media accounts. She has a public Instagram account with about 50,000 followers. On October 29th, the same day as the accident, she posted a video. He showed me the screen, and I watched it. The video showed Vanessa sitting in her BMW, laughing and talking to the camera. The timestamp on the video said 6:32 p.m., just 17 minutes after the collision. She was saying, "Oh my God, you guys, I just had the craziest drive. I was running so late and I literally flew through every light. I think I might have hit a pothole or something because my car made this huge bang, but whatever. I made it to my meeting on time." She was smiling, she was laughing, and in the background I could see a small dent on the front corner of her BMW. She knew. She absolutely knew. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just a hit and run anymore. This was someone who knew exactly what she'd done, posted about it online, and then lied to the police and to me. I looked at Vanessa and said,
Further checks uncover prior speeding tickets quietly dismissed after calls from her powerful father. A pattern emerges, rules bent, consequences softened. The judge recognizes this isn't an isolated mistake, but a history of protection. He escalates the matter, calling in the state attorney. What was once a routine traffic hearing now threatens to expose a deeper culture of influence and immunity.
Said, "You posted a video 17 minutes after you hit Mr. Brennan's car, and you joked about it. You knew you hit something, and you didn't care enough to stop." Her face went pale, and for the first time she didn't have a quick answer. Her attorney stood up and said, "Your Honor, my client didn't mean..." I held up my hand and said, "Sit down, counselor, I'm not finished. I want to pause here and say something to everyone watching this. If you believe that justice should apply to everyone, no matter how much money they have or who their parents are, leave a comment below and let me know. Because what happened next is about protecting the dignity of people like Harold, who work hard, follow the rules, and deserve to be treated with respect. Let me tell you what I did. I asked Officer Torres if he had checked for any other violations, and he said he had. He told me that when they went to Vanessa's home to question her, they found her BMW parked in the driveway with visible damage to the front driver's side. He said they also discovered she had 2 prior speeding tickets in the last 6 months, both dismissed after her father, who is a prominent oil executive with connections to the local police union, made some calls. Officer Torres looked uncomfortable telling me this, but I appreciate.
As reality sets in, her confidence crumbles. Tears replace defiance. She admits she panicked, afraid her father would punish her for another ticket. The judge cuts through it. Panic doesn't justify abandoning a wounded stranger. Moments later, the state attorney recommends additional charges: reckless driving, false reporting, obstruction. The courtroom shifts from lecture to legal reckoning.
His honesty. He said the officers involved in those cases were told to reduce the charges to warnings. I sat back in my chair and thought about what I was hearing. This wasn't just a case of a careless driver. This was a case of someone who believed the rules didn't apply to her and who had been proven right over and over again because people in power protected her. I thought about Harold sitting in the back of the courtroom holding his baseball cap, wondering if he'd ever get justice. I thought about his daughter, who needed her medication and her father's presence. And I thought about every other person who'd been.
The sentence lands with unmistakable force. Multiple charges, full restitution, 200 hours of community service at a veteran center, and a 1-year license suspension. Any interference will trigger harsher consequences. Her final protest about her father is silenced immediately. For the first time, she nods in submission. Privilege meets accountability, and the balance of power decisively changes.
Hurt by someone like Vanessa and never got their day in court. I made a decision right there to call in someone who could make sure this case was handled properly. I asked my clerk to contact the State Attorney General's office and request that someone come down to my courtroom immediately. I also asked Officer Torres to stay and provide his full report. Vanessa's attorney looked panicked. He said, "Your Honor, this is highly unusual for a traffic case." I looked at him and said, "Counselor, this stopped being a traffic case the moment your client lied under oath and posted evidence of her crime on social media." While we waited for the state attorney to arrive, I asked Vanessa if she had anything else to say. She looked at me with tears starting to form in her eyes, and I could see her whole demeanor had changed. She said, "Judge, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt anyone.
Harold rises and speaks with quiet dignity, reminding her that everyone on the road is someone's family. His grace cuts deeper than any reprimand. Asked to apologize, she finally does. Halting, humbled, he accepts with a simple thank you. In that exchange, the courtroom witnesses something rare. Not just punishment, but a lesson in humility delivered by the very man she wronged.
I panicked. I asked her why she panicked, and she said, "Because my father would have been furious if I got another ticket. He already told me if I got one more, he'd take my car away." I looked at her and said, "So instead of taking responsibility, you left an elderly veteran on the side of the road and joked about it online?" She started crying for real now, and I saw her hands shaking. Her attorney tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away. She said, "I didn't think it was that bad. I didn't think anyone was really hurt." I said, "Ms. Caldwell, you didn't think about anyone but yourself. That's the problem. You didn't stop to check. You didn't call 911. You didn't even slow down. And when the police came to your door, you lied. That's not panic. That's selfishness." The state attorney arrived about 20 minutes later. Her name was Rebecca Ortiz, and I'd worked with her before on cases that needed extra attention. I explained the situation to her, showed her the video, and walked her through Officer Torres's report. She listened carefully, took notes, and then looked at Vanessa with the kind of expression that said she'd seen this story before. Attorney Ortiz said, "Your Honor, based on what I'm hearing, I'd like to recommend additional charges of reckless driving, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice." I nodded and said, "I agree." I looked at Vanessa and said, "Miss Caldwell, here's what's going to happen. You are going to be charged with hit-and-run reckless driving, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice. You are going to pay full restitution to Mr. Brennan for his vehicle, his medical expenses, and his lost wages. You are also going to perform 200...
After the gavel falls, reflection lingers. Harold leaves knowing his voice mattered. The defendant leaves knowing her name cannot shield her. The judge reflects on fairness, on the duty to see those who are often overlooked. Justice here was not about status or wealth, but accountability. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.